Well, hi everyone, Sean here. Thank you for taking in the presentation, Myths to Explore, Important Questions to Ask. This particular video has been produced. It'll be a part of a series of video presentations dealing with the important area of retirement income planning. It's one of the first videos that we wanted to produce because there are myths out there that keep people from effectively planning or even starting to plan for retirement. I'm just going to talk about 5 of these myths. There are many more, but we'll cover them off. And if you identify with any of these myths, then hopefully my discussion about them will be a catalyst to get you planning for your retirement. The other component is key questions to ask, and there are some very important questions to ask right at the front end before you begin the retirement planning process, because whether you do it on your own or whether you have an advisor working with you, they're going to ask you some of these questions, and the more you reflect on them and plan in advance, the more effectively you can use the process that your advisor makes available to you. So let's talk about this in a little more detail. So getting clear on outcomes, like I said, we'll talk about the myths, but the way you get clear on outcomes is asking good questions, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, myth versus fact. There are some myths out there about retirement income planning. We're going to talk about them. What we really want to do is engage in facts. One of the most important components to retirement income planning is really sitting down with an advisor. I would recommend that. It sounds like I'm biased, I'm in the business, but the reality is a physician doesn't do their own diagnosis. They have another physician look at them. And I think that it's difficult for us to be objective about our own finances. So the role of your advisor is to sit down with you and to talk facts, not myths. We can rationalize away a lot of things in our circumstances, not the least of which would be finances and retirement income planning. So your advisor plays an important role to be objective, to give you a State of the Union address about where you stand, and then help you map out a very specific game plan to get you from point A to point B, and it ends up being an ongoing conversation. It's not static. You have to go through ongoing planning because life does change over time, of course. So what are some myths to think about? Here's one. Myth number 1, financial planning is only for those with lots of money. Now, there's no doubt that if you have a large financial base, when you initiate planning and strategies, the benefit to you ends up being that much larger than someone who doesn't have as much wealth. However, I would strongly argue that those folks who have less financial wealth have to plan even more effectively because they have to really make good use of the financial resources that they have accumulated. So it's not just for the wealthy, it's for all of us. Effective planning is not a waste of time. It's an important thing that we need to do, and it's not just for the super affluent. Myth number 2, preparing a financial plan is too expensive. Now there's different models out there. For sure you can engage a financial planner who will work on a fee-for-service basis or retainer arrangement or a fee-based model. There are many advisors who provide financial planning and they're compensated through the products and services that you might acquire as a result of doing that planning. Both models work well. One's not necessarily better than the other. But what's very important in both models is that there's proper disclosure. You know how the advisor is going to work, what their process is, what they're going to deliver, and how they're going to be compensated. And I think as long as there's clear disclosure and you know exactly what kind of engagement you're getting involved in, I think that's very appropriate. But whatever the cost is, in my mind, it's not an expense, it's an investment. If you do effective planning, it's going to help you walk around landmines potentially down the road. So if you do good planning today, it's going to pay huge dividends over the length of your planning horizon, which is over the next 3 years, 5 years, 15, 25 years. So it's not too expensive to miss those landmines. A good advisor can help save you an awful lot of money and help you make good decisions over time. And there's 2 kinds of decisions. There's the pure financial decisions, but there's also moments where you're fraught with emotion. Part of financial planning is to help people go through and navigate change. And so we have someone who's part of a resource network that we put together, and she said when life changes, money changes. When money changes, life changes. And the worst time to be making important financial decisions is when you're going through major transition crisis, either mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physically. And your advisor, your financial team, plays a really, really important role in helping you to navigate the financial decisions during those very tough times. And they can help you get around and help you from keep you from making very bad decisions during those times. Myth number 3, planning will take too much time and effort. Well, quite frankly, if someone comes to the table thinking that way, then I don't know how much you can really do. There's no doubt that anything in life that takes that's valuable may take some time and effort. There's no doubt that when I walk someone through a financial planning process, there's investment of time on their part. There's the meetings we have together. We have to have them gather information. They have to pull that information together. They have to find it. Maybe they have to talk to other advisors they're working with. And so it is a process that takes some amount of time. But that investment, again, of time in the front end saves huge amounts of time at the back end. So if you're someone who's procrastinating, you're not planning, what I can pretty much guarantee is that you're going to spend a lot more time on the back end putting out fires than the front end time that you could have put in to start the planning process that would have saved you lots of time at the back end, because you're not putting out fires and dealing with the tyranny of the urgent because you hadn't done effective planning. So it's worth putting the time into the process. Myth number 4, revealing my finances will be too embarrassing. We all have things in our personal lives, whether it's financially or other areas, that we're not too proud of and wish we had done differently, and we have regrets of the past. But that should not stop you from sitting down with an advisor to go through it. They're not going to pass value judgments on you. They're going to sit down with you as professionals to look at where you are today and then try to find the most efficient plan possible to get you from point A to point B. They're there to coach you, to be a confidant, to someone that you can trust and that will shepherd you through and along this process. So as hard as it might be, revealing your finances to that professional might be one of the best decisions you've ever made. There'll be a weight that's lifted from you. You'll feel empowered to make decisions. You'll get clarity about what actions to begin taking, and you'll start to make progress. Myth number 5, once you're past a certain age, it's too late. Now, there's no doubt that there's certain things like time and compound interest where the earlier you start, the more effective that's going to be for you. But it's never too late to take a look at the strategies and planning opportunities. Whether you're pre-retirement, in retirement, and long into retirement, there will always be things that you can do more effectively when you have someone offering sober second thought, looking over your shoulder, giving you counsel, maybe aware of strategies that you're not aware of. It's a very dynamic planning environment that we're in, whether it's capital market changes, investment product changes, legislative changes, tax changes. There's all kinds of things that go on. Changes to circumstances personally that affect our planning. It's never too late to plan. So please push that off to the side, sit down with your advisor and say, you know what? I've done a lot of planning. It's been a long time since I planned with someone. I need to sit down and update this plan. I'm 75. Is it too late? It's not too late. So make sure that you are always engaged in the planning process. Now, talk about some myths. Those aren't all of them, but hopefully it gets you thinking a little bit. Questions. Questions are extremely important because they begin to frame your financial plan a little bit as you work with your advisor. So there's thousands, literally, of products and services and strategies that one can take a look at when they're engaged in retirement income planning and retirement planning. But there may be only, let's say, 20 key strategies that are relevant to your particular circumstances. And questions play a key role in helping to narrow down which strategies are most beneficial or appropriate for your circumstances. So let's take a look at some of those questions. When? When does retirement happen? Is it a one-time, like, here's the date and I'm fully retired? Or does a transition look something different than that? I'm going to phase out from my current career, but I'm going to still work. And I maybe work for another 5 to 10 years past my initial transition date from what I'm doing now, and I'll gradually reduce responsibility and time commitments. So you need to begin thinking through what that looks like for you. Is it just retiring into leisure? Will you continue working? Will you work part-time? What will you be doing? Are the things you need to be planning now to make that transition effective? So that's one of the first questions you need to address. Secondly, how much after-tax income do you need? If you've never tracked your expenses, probably a good idea to do that once in a while. I'm not a big believer in budgets, but I do think it's important to track expenses to get a sense as to where you're trending. So how much income will you need? What will your monthly expenses be? What annual after-tax expenses will you have? Are there periodic lump sum expenses for vacations or maintenance on your home or upgrading your vehicles from time to time? And so those are important questions to begin asking and trying to figure out. And what kind of expenses will you have? You could have basic expenses and discretionary. Basic expenses would be expenses that just never go away. It's just the month-to-month expenses that are just part of basic living. And discretionary expenses, of course, are things that you have some discretion over. So it could be travel expenses. It could be, flying that grandchild home for a visit. It could be creating family memories and opportunities. It could be educational experiences. But whatever they might be, you have some control around the timing and the dollar amounts of them. And so you want to start breaking down those expenses, knowing what has to be there every month, no matter what, and those expenses where you have a little more wiggle room or control over, that's an important part of the planning process. What about inflation rates and return expectations or requirements? So inflation would be important because some of your basic pensions may not have cost of living adjustments to them. Some might, some may not, and as a result, maybe you have to cope with inflation by reducing expenses over time, getting better rates of return in your portfolio. It could be pulling more money from your accounts to subsidize your cash flows because of the impact of inflation. So the costs of goods and services typically are always going up, and so you need to be finding ways of coping on that trend, particularly if you have a lot of fixed income that's not inflation proofed. And so those return expectations as well tie into your inflation assumptions. Your return expectations will be really impacted by how conservative you'll be on your portfolio, your tax status, maybe your age, previous investment experiences. So you need to understand what you want to achieve from a return standpoint, and you need to think about that number because your advisor is going to start asking you some questions around that. And the kind of return expectations that you have or the returns that you need to get have a very big impact on the final portfolio design that you're going to be looking at for your accounts. What about health and life expectancy? Some of you come from families where there's long life expectancy, some of you don't. This is a tough one. I mean, we're not promised anything in this area. But when you look at your particular health and longevity, what would be reasonable expectations? What's your philosophy around spending? Some people might want to spend a lot of their money in the first 15 years of retirement because they're not all that confident that they're going to have good health for an extended period of time. So they'll front-end load a lot of those expenses. So you need to talk about that. You need to talk about life expectancy for your partner as well. And you need to plan around not just one life expectancy, but how your retirement income planning will work both while you're both living and then when one of you predeceases the other and there's ongoing income needs for that partner, you need to talk through that as well. So a very important area. Do you want to incorporate legacy planning? So sometimes we'll talk to folks who not only do they want to look at their own retirement income security, but they want to have legacy assets that will pass on to a foundation, a charity, their children, their grandchildren, and that has important planning implications in terms of how much they can spend, how much they want to keep in reserve, and so do you have any goals in that way? Now some clients go, listen, the legacy planning took place when my kids were younger. I put them through university, provided experiences for them. Now they're now launched into their careers or their lives, and I'm going to spend every dime I've made the day before I die. So that might be your legacy plan. But whatever it might be, you need to get clarity on that before you talk to your advisor. What are your wellness strategies? You know, we do need to have a strategy. I think, I'm biased around this, it's an important part of my life is wellness and exercise and that kind of thing. But I do think that, you know, we spend years accumulating financial assets and we transition, you know, maybe from our primary career focus to retirement or transition slowly into retirement years. And it would be a shame if we'd done all that planning and then because of poor health, we're just not able to enjoy it. And so your wellness strategies need to take place ideally well before retirement so you maintain your health and vitality. If you haven't been engaged in that previously, my encouragement to you is to make sure you explore that and you start to try to integrate wellness strategies into your life so that you can enjoy the reason why you've been planning effectively for retirement. And what about purpose? We often fail to take this into account. You know, there's a financial piece, but then there's meaning we get from whether it's raising our families or being in a career or important hobbies that we were plugged into while we were working, and we had all these connections. And then when you go through retirement transition, some of these relationships and connections and being parts of different communities begin to fragment a little bit. And what you see is a lot of people go through a period where they have a sense of a lack of purpose. Not everyone can play golf every day and get meaning from that. Not everyone can just travel ongoing and get real meaning out of that. Sometimes that begins to wear a little bit thin and our sense of purpose begins to wane. We feel a little bit empty inside. And so the way we combat that is we begin thinking about what does my work or the things that I'm engaged in now before I retire, how does that give my life purpose? And are there intentional strategies I can begin working into my life that will continue to provide me that purpose and sense of meaning in my life. So very important part of the retirement planning questions, and I would encourage you to ask yourself that question. How do you maintain purpose and meaning as you transition out of areas that maybe are giving you some purpose and meaning? Well, those are some key questions to ask and some myths to explode. We have a process called Gameplan, and so if you haven't engaged in the retirement income planning process, we would encourage you to take a look at this process. We develop an overall game plan that ties in your retirement planning, investments, tax reduction strategies, legacy planning, and most important is confirming whether you're on track to funding your after-tax income goals that you've been aspiring to and planning for. So we really help to make sure that process is in place for you. The game plan process has a few steps. We have the introductory phase where we help prospective clients figure out whether the process is right for them. Discovery, where we look at opportunities and strategies that maybe you're not taking advantage of that we can help you take advantage of. Specific written recommendations and commentaries. You've got a detailed action plan then that you can follow. That's game plan. It really does lead to peace of mind and confidence about your future planning. Thanks for taking the time to view the presentation. If you want more information about our services, feel free to visit www.seanhumphreys.com or email us at shumphreys@asante.com. We would love to have a conversation with you about how we can assist you with your retirement income planning and walk you through the game plan process. You take care.